At 50, Jimmy Kimmel staged what might be the most consequential late-night moment in modern television, a live, unbroken broadcast in which he laid out what he called his most thorough public case against Donald Trump. Pulling in leaked documents, whistleblower testimony, forensic accounting sheets, legal depositions, campaign finance audits, offshore incorporation records, private jet manifests, audio transcripts, video excerpts, and internal email assembled with enough clarity to feel like a televised grand jury. Indictment tanned as Kimmel began. The tone shifted immediately. A late-night set transformed into a fact verification court, with him acting less as comedian than as a storyteller. Armed with evidence, he wasted no time showing forensic charts tracing millions of dollars from Trump family entities into shell accounts in the Cayman Islands, funnels into political action committees, hush money payments cleverly concealed as consulting fees, documents suggesting pay-for-play, political access exchanged for campaign contributions, and emails ostensibly between donors and advisors confirming expectations of influence in return for large donations. Each chart he displayed contained watermarked flyers that matched real subpoenas. He juxtaposed quotes from legal filings with cinematic visuals, headlines about unudituted tax returns, audio of alleged directives from Trump aides instructing campaign staff to avoid questions altogether, statements from ex-staffers claiming that they were told they would lose their job if they refused to comply with murky campaign financing strategies and correspondences, noting lists of high-profile donors receiving private invitations to exclusive events at Mar-a-Lago in exchange for opening political access. Kimmel played audio clips recorded during late-night deposition, breaking on camera as former employees described being warned by lawyers to shred documents or directed to sign non-disclosure agreements to silence allegations. Andy framed each of these fragments with timelines showing when Trump was president, when financial compliance filings reportedly diverged from audit filings, and when hush deals coincided with personal scandals, suggesting not coincidence but a pattern. Importantly, he presented visual evidence of checks written from one family shell company to another. Small sums, sometimes $10,000, passed around to obscure ownership records, arguing that the amounts were roughly the same as reported hush payments. And while raising suspicion that this laundering continued through real estate flips tied to campaign cash, he also highlighted instances where charitable funds donations from Trump family foundations were redirected into maintenance costs of Trump properties or marketing campaigns unrelated to charity mission statements, raising eyebrows about self-dealing and nonprofit misuse. Although known for comedy, Kimmel Stone remained sober throughout, leaning into the camera at several points and stating plainly, "This isn't speculative. This isn't offense. This is evidence." He repeatedly challenged Trump's legal team to review the documents on air to demand transparency under sworn legal review to engage in scrutiny rather than silence. He said, "If this is false, let's air it in a court of Lona." In press releases, in one deeply affecting segment, he showed cell phone footage and photographs from a late-night fundraiser event, pointing out that guests arrived via private planes bearing Shell entity flight codes, names matching donor records and shell corporations, then paired that with a snippet of concern from a former flight attendant who described how she was instructed not to ask questions about passenger names or ages. Though no camera identified passengers, whistleblowers reported that the same coded names reappeared in hotel ledgers tied to credentialed staff allegedly used to vet underage escorts, a phrase Kimmel tied directly to previous reporting about Epstein's circles. As the show neared its climactic end, Jimmy anchored the emotional tone by playing a video deposit from a former aide whose voice rattled with emotion as she described feeling trapped. "They made me complicit in anything or nothing at all. I kept quiet for my family's sake." The room held that moment in silence. It was raw, unfiltered, and pointed not just to misdeeds but to human cost. He then stated, "We owe every one of them a chance at justice." Viewers noted how most late-night broadcasts shift tone every few minutes. This special denatit built steadily, methodically toward the conclusion that Trump's public denials, "I know nothing," "I'm a savvy businessman now" sounded hollow when faced with documents and witness testimony suggesting intimate knowledge and repeated control over these activities. Immediately after the show aired, major news outlets began cross-referencing data Kimmel provided. Public tax returns, leaked whistleblower affidavit, archived FOIA data, and pieces of reporting previously dismissed as rumor now appeared validated. Several attorneys general in key states New York, Georgia, California publicly acknowledged they were opening financial misconduct inquiries, citing precisely the discrepancies Kimmel presented. Congressional members tweeted that they would schedule hearings referencing the guest lists and flight logs he displayed. Meanwhile, social media moved in real time. Users shared time-stamped screenshots. Twitter debates about late-night disclosure versus journalistic outlets. Advocates praising late-night vigilante journalism and Reddit threads exploding with calls for transparency, justice, and renewed skepticism of unchecked power. Pundits debated whether a comedian could be a de facto whistleblower, with some defending Kimmel's integrity and others criticizing him for presenting legal claims outside traditional press channels. But most agreed that this broadcast blurred boundaries in a way that changed expectations of public accountability. Simultaneously, lawyers representing Trump or his businesses countered with legal statements denouncing the broadcast as smear theater, demanding that Kimmel retract statements claiming defamation, non-disclosure breach, and threatening lawsuits. But Kimmel's response, voiced calmly, assuredly was that every document he cited had already been leaked to law enforcement or press. Some came directly from former Trump Tower staff, others from finance auditors who requested anonymity. His producers affirmed that every source had been vetted by legal teams before air. The show's producer invited any court to subpoena the same data, stating, "All this is already in the public domain of investigation." Analysts noted that by putting truth to public names on live television, Kimmel effectively accelerated legal timelines. Several states later confirmed within days that their prosecutors would fast-track grand jury deadlines to pursue allegations grounded in Kimmel's documentation. Furthermore, survivors' rights organizations credited Kimmel with amplifying the broader narrative that power brokers often hide in plain sight, that entertainment can act as citizen-driven monitoring, and that the shame of exposure often comes from systemic effects of silence, not isolated incidents. They used the broadcast as a case study in power gap discussions, pointing out how wealthy elites like Trump can expect loyalty and confidentiality in private, expecting silence in public, but may crumble when the spotlight reveals financial wires and documented testimony. Donor advocacy groups compared the broadcast to releasing transactional receipts from foundations, turning suspicion into tangible entry points for whistleblowing and regulatory oversight. In the following week, Kimmel faced interviews across platforms when asked whether he feared defamation liability. He replied that journalists who refused to do similar deep dives often signaled something was being protected. He said he acted in public interest, emphasizing the difference between irresponsibility and responsibility. He acknowledged the gravity of using his platform to outline wrongdoing and said he did so not for political score but for public accountability, that viewers deserved to hear the records themselves layered in narrative. He apologized briefly to any staff who may have been harmed by uncertainty, but reaffirmed his commitment to journalistic ethics. His words launched broader conversations about the evolution of platforms that hold truth. No longer just legal news outlets or investigative newsletters, but